My name's Charles Whitfield, but most folks just call me Chuck. I'm 68 years old, a retired electrician, and I've lived in the same little brick house on Birchwood Avenue for over 40 years. The day my son drove me to that nursing home, nothing about it felt like care. It felt like business. It started with a phone call that morning. Malik said, "Dad, I'm coming by. We need to check out a place that could make things easier for you." His voice was polite, like someone closing a deal. I told him I didn't need any place. I had my house, my tools, my routine. But he'd already made up his mind. He showed up an hour later in his company car, wearing a suit and that cologne that smells like money. Two strangers got out of the back, a man and a woman in navy polos with a logo I didn't recognize. They smiled like professionals who'd rehearsed their lines. "This is just an assessment, Dad," Malik said. "They'll look at the house, check safety things. You know, stairs, wiring, maybe the bathroom." I let them in. They walked around taking pictures with a tablet. One of them whispered something about fall risk. I stood there in my own living room while they talked about me in the third person. When they left, Malik said we should grab lunch and look at a place. Just for comparison. I didn't want to go, but arguing with your own child feels wrong, so I put on my jacket and followed him out. We drove across town. He talked about liability and peace of mind. I stared out the window. He used to talk about baseball, or his kids, or his job. Now everything was about control and efficiency. When we pulled up to Willow Pines Assisted Living, I realized lunch was never part of the plan. He parked, got out, and said, "Just take a look inside, Dad." The woman at the front desk smiled and said, "Mr. Whitfield, we've been expecting you." She already had paperwork in front of her, with my name typed neatly across the top. I looked at Malik. "You been planning this?" he said. "Dad, please. You need supervision. You fell last year, remember? That was a loose step on the porch," I said. "I fixed it the next day." He didn't respond. He just handed my keys to the woman and said, "Hold on to these until he's settled." That's when I understood. This wasn't a visit. It was a drop-off. He patted my shoulder like he was comforting me. "Just try it for a few days. You'll thank me later." Then he walked out. No hug. No goodbye. I sat there in that small room they called temporary housing, listening to the sound of the door clicking shut. I wasn't confused. I wasn't weak. I was angry, but quiet. That's the moment I decided I'd never let anyone, not even my own son, take my life out of my hands again. Before all this happened, my life was simple, maybe too simple for a man like my son to respect. But it was mine, and that used to mean something. Every morning started the same way. I'd wake up at 6, make a cup of coffee in my old percolator, and sit by the kitchen window watching the neighborhood come alive. The same mailman, the same barking dog next door, the same old lady walking with her cane but refusing to slow down. Familiar things. Steady things. I liked it that way. After coffee, I'd walk out to the garage. That place was my world, pegboard walls, old wrenches lined up like soldiers, the smell of oil and wood shavings. I'd built every shelf in there with my own hands. Some folks hang up pictures of vacations. I hung up my old union badge and the plaque from when I hit 35 years with the city electrical department. I worked hard for that, and I wasn't ashamed of it. My wife, Dolores, used to joke that I treated that garage better than the house. She wasn't wrong. But after she passed, the garage was the one place that still felt alive. I could fix things, build things. It gave me purpose. Malik didn't understand that. He saw me as an old man clinging to habits instead of a man holding on to what's left of his identity. That's where the distance started. He came by less after his mother died. Said work was busy. Said the kids had sports, dance, whatever. I didn't complain. I know how life gets. But over time, the calls turned into texts, and the texts turned into silence, until he needed something. That's when I'd hear from him again. The first signs something had shifted came last spring. He stopped asking if I needed help and started deciding what I needed help with. "Dad, I'll take care of your bills online," he said one Sunday after church. "Less stress for you." I told him I'd been paying bills before he was even born. Didn't matter. Next month, my mail started coming lighter. Then the paper statements stopped altogether. I asked him about it, and he said, "I set up paperless. It's better this way." Better for who? Then he started looking at the house like it was an investment instead of a home. "You know, Dad, these older properties are hard to maintain. You could get good money selling this place." I said, "I'm not looking to sell. I built this life with your mother. I'm staying right here." He smiled that same fake business smile and said, "Just keeping your options open." That was the kind of talk that made my blood pressure climb. Because when someone says, options, what they really mean is plans they already made for you. The last time I saw him before the drop-off, he came over with a clipboard. Said he was checking the condition of the house for insurance purposes. He measured things, took pictures, and kept talking about risk and liability. I told him I wasn't some broken project that needed a risk assessment. He laughed it off, said I was too defensive. Maybe I was, but I had reason to be. You see, when you work with electricity your whole life, you learn how current travels, quiet, invisible, deadly if you ignore it. I could feel that same quiet current in the way Malik started treating me. Something was coming, and I didn't know what yet. My neighbors noticed the change too. "Your boy doing all right?" old Mr. Jenkins asked one afternoon. "He's fine," I said. "You sure? He was outside the other day talking to a man with a camera, pointing at your porch like he owned it." That hit me hard. I didn't say anything, but inside I felt something break. My son was moving around my life like I wasn't even there, like I was a problem to be solved, not a man to be respected. A week later, a lady from the bank called. She said she wanted to confirm the new contact details on file. I told her I hadn't changed anything. She hesitated and said, "Oh, I see. Well, maybe your son updated them for convenience." That's when I knew this wasn't just him trying to help. He was building a system, one that cut me out of my own decisions. Still, I didn't confront him right away. Maybe that was my mistake. I wanted to believe it came from good intentions, that he was just overprotective. But good intentions don't make you take a man's keys or fill out paperwork behind his back. Then came the conversation that confirmed everything. He stopped by one night with a stack of mail in his hand. "Dad, some of your accounts are overdue," he said, setting envelopes on the counter. I opened them and realized they were unopened because they'd been sitting in his office. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "You're keeping my mail now?" He said, "I'm managing your affairs." "It's just temporary." I asked, "Who said I needed managing?" He sighed like I was being difficult. "Dad, come on. You're almost 70. You shouldn't be worrying about all this paperwork. You should relax. Let professionals handle things." That word, professionals, got under my skin. I spent my life fixing power lines in thunderstorms, crawling through attics, and wiring half this neighborhood. But somehow, I wasn't qualified to manage my own light bill. He had a way of talking down to me that made me feel small in my own house. It wasn't yelling or disrespect in the open. It was subtle. Polite. Like he'd already decided I was losing it. That night, after he left, I sat at my kitchen table and looked around the house. Every corner had a story. The dent in the wall by the stairs, that's where he threw his toy truck at age 6. The faded patch on the living room rug, where Dolores spilled coffee the morning she told me she was pregnant. I kept the house clean, organized, and safe. But to him, it was just too old. He didn't see memories. He saw a burden. And that's what angered me the most. Not that he thought I needed help, but that he thought I couldn't decide for myself. That he could just take over without asking. A few days later, I saw a brochure on my kitchen counter that said, "Peace of mind for your loved ones." It showed smiling seniors and talked about transitional living. I knew Malik had left it there. He didn't even bother to hide it. That night, I sat down with my coffee and told myself one thing: if he ever tried to move me out of my home, I wouldn't fight him with shouting or begging. I'd fight him with proof, paper, and patience. Because love without respect isn't love. It's control dressed up as concern. So when he called that morning, the morning of the assessment, I already knew something was off. I went along with it, not because I trusted him, but because I wanted to see how far he was willing to go. And now I know. He was willing to go all the way. I didn't sleep much those first few nights at Willow Pines. They called it an assisted living community, but it felt like a holding pen for people waiting to disappear. My room was small but clean, with one window that looked out at a parking lot and a single chair by the bed. They had schedules for everything: breakfast at 7, activities at 10, lights out by 9. It was organized, predictable, and soul-killing. They treated me politely enough, but it was the kind of politeness that comes from policy, not heart. You could feel it in the way they smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. They'd knock, come in without waiting, and talk to me like I was half there. "How are we feeling today, Mr. Whitfield?" We. Like I needed a committee to know how I felt. Every time that door opened, I thought about my house, my tools, my porch, the hum of the refrigerator that I could fix by sound alone. Those small things reminded me I was still capable. Here, capability didn't matter. The system ran on signatures, and someone had signed mine without asking. The first real clue came that Thursday, during lunch. I was sitting with a man named Harold who used to be a bus driver. He leaned over and said, "Your boy was here this morning." I said, "My son?" "Yeah," he said, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Sharp suit. Talking to the administrator about your file. Looked like business." My stomach tightened. Malik hadn't mentioned visiting. He hadn't called, hadn't checked in, nothing. I asked the nurse later if he'd been there, and she smiled and said, "Oh yes, he dropped off some papers for your care plan. Such a good son." I nodded, but inside I felt something twist. Papers. Care plan. Those were his favorite words lately, the language of control dressed as kindness. That night, I walked down the hall to the payphone near the vending machines. I still had quarters in my wallet. Habits don't die easy. I called my old neighbor Jenkins. "Hey, you keeping an eye on the place?" I asked. "Sure am," he said. "But there's been folks coming by. Some lady with a clipboard, and a man with a camera, looked like they were taking pictures of your backyard last week." My jaw clenched. "Did they say who they were?" "Realtor types," he said. "Had a sign in the trunk. For sale, pending. Figured you knew." I didn't respond right away. I just leaned against that wall and let the truth settle like bad medicine. My son was selling my house while I was sitting in a facility I never agreed to live in. When I got back to my room, I stared at the ceiling and thought about every conversation we'd had in the past year. All the help, all the safety, all the polite insistence that he was doing what was best for me. It wasn't about me. It was about him. My life, my property, my independence, they were just steps in his plan. The next morning, I went to the office and asked to see my file. The administrator, a woman named Collins, smiled too wide. "Oh, those are private records, Mr. Whitfield. Only your primary contact can access those." "Who's my primary contact?" I asked. She looked at the screen, then said, "Your son, Malik Whitfield." "Show me where I signed that," I said. Her smile faltered. "You authorized it when you were admitted." "I didn't sign a damn thing," I said, keeping my voice low but steady. "I want to see what's on file." She hesitated, but rules are rules, and after enough calm insistence, she printed a page. My signature was at the bottom, or something that looked like it. The letters were smooth, careful, too neat to be mine. That was the moment my patience turned to anger. Real, focused anger, not the kind you shout with, but the kind that hardens your spine. I didn't raise my voice. I thanked her, took the paper, and went back to my room. Then I folded it carefully and put it in an envelope with the date written on the front. Evidence. From that moment, I started paying attention to everything. Who came in and out of the office? What time Malik visited? Who he talked to? I wrote it all down in a small notebook I kept under the mattress. If I was going to get my life back, I needed proof. That evening, a nurse named Alana stopped by to drop off my medication. She was different from the others, calm, direct, no fake cheerfulness. "You doing okay, Mr. Whitfield?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said. "Just curious, you ever see a family member take over someone's life without asking?" She gave me a look. "All the time. Usually it's money. Sometimes guilt. Either way, they call it love." Her answer stuck with me. We started talking more after that. I told her bits and pieces, how my son had taken my keys, how he'd been changing things behind my back. She didn't judge. She just listened, then said, "You know you don't have to stay here if you don't want to, right? If you're of sound mind, you can check yourself out." That got my attention. "You mean legally?" "Legally," she said. "You might need a competency exam, but if you pass, you're free to go. Folks forget that part." That night, I didn't sleep at all. I thought about every bill I'd ever paid on time, every license I'd renewed, every neighbor who could vouch for me being sharp as ever. I wasn't losing my mind. My son just wanted my house. The next morning, I asked to use the phone again. I called Pastor Leon, old friend, known me since my wedding day. When I told him what happened, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "Charles, you get yourself evaluated. Prove you're competent. Then we'll talk about getting a lawyer." "Any suggestions?" I asked. "I'll connect you with Evelyn Turner," he said. "She helped one of our church ladies last year with a similar case. Smart woman. Doesn't scare easy." That's when my plans started to form. Slow, careful, deliberate, the way I'd wire a live panel. You don't rush something that carries this much current. 2 days later, I asked Nurse Alana to help me set up an appointment for a medical evaluation. She made a few calls and arranged for a doctor to come by. The evaluation was straightforward: memory, coordination, some simple questions about my finances and family. When it was done, the doctor said, "Mr. Whitfield, you're as sharp as a tack. I'll file my report today." That report was my ticket out. A week later, when Malik came to visit, I didn't let on that I knew anything. I let him talk, the way guilty men talk when they think they've won. He said, "Dad, you seem more relaxed. They taking good care of you?" I nodded. "They are. You been busy with the house?" He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to notice. "House? No, not really." "Why?" "Just wondering," I said. "Jenkins mentioned some folks stopping by." He looked away. "Oh, yeah? Just an appraisal, standard procedure. No big deal." I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "No big deal to you, maybe?" For the first time, he couldn't hold my gaze. That's when I knew he realized I was onto him. After he left, I wrote everything down. Date, time, his words, all of it. Then I called Evelyn. She picked up on the second ring. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Pastor Leon told me about your situation. You're doing the right thing keeping records. Bring everything you have, the forged signature, your notes, any witnesses." "I don't have a car," I said. "I'll come to you," she replied. "You just make sure your paperwork is ready." That weekend, she came by. Professional woman, maybe in her early 50s, briefcase in hand, eyes that missed nothing. She looked through the papers and said, "This isn't guardianship yet, but your son's setting it up. He's filed for a durable power of attorney, and he's already talking to a realtor. Once that goes through, he'll control everything, your money, your property, your medical care." "Not if I get there first," I said. She smiled slightly. "That's the spirit." She drew up a few forms, explained them slowly so I'd understand every line. One was to revoke any power of attorney that might have been submitted under false pretenses. Another was to reinstate me as the sole decision-maker for my finances. The third was a temporary protection order against property sale without my consent. I signed every one of them with a steady hand. My hand. After she left, I sat by that small window in the facility and watched the sun go down over the parking lot. The light hit the glass just right, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt calm. Not happy, calm. Because I knew what came next wasn't about revenge. It was about taking back what was already mine. Malik thought I was weak because I didn't yell. But yelling doesn't fix a circuit. You find the fault, you isolate it, and you shut it down quietly. That's exactly what I planned to do. 2 weeks after Evelyn helped me file those papers, the truth about what Malik had done finally came to light. And even though I had suspected most of it, hearing the details still cut deep. It started with a letter from the county recorder's office. One of Evelyn's assistants forwarded it to me after she ran a background check on the property. It was titled Notice of Intent to Transfer Real Estate Ownership. My own address, 342 Birchwood Avenue, was printed across the top, and the requester's name read Malik Whitfield. He had already initiated the sale of my home. Under normal circumstances, that kind of transaction would need my signature. But the document referenced a power of attorney dated April 7th, supposedly giving Malik full legal authority over my estate. The signature looked like mine, but it wasn't. The loops were wrong, the angle too steady, the ink too smooth. Someone had traced my name with patience and purpose. When Evelyn came by the next morning, I handed her the paper without a word. She looked it over, nodded, and said quietly, "He's crossed the line from control into fraud." I said nothing. I just stared at the corner of that document, and thought about the day I'd taught that boy how to write his name. He was 6, sitting at our old kitchen table, tongue between his teeth, pressing the pencil too hard. I'd guided his hand, told him, "A man's signature means something. Don't ever write it down unless you stand behind it." Now he'd used mine to steal from me. Evelyn reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I've already filed an injunction to freeze any sale. The realtor he contacted will be notified today. We'll need to prove you're competent, which shouldn't be hard given your evaluation results. Once the judge sees the paperwork, your son's claims fall apart." Her voice was calm, efficient. But beneath that calm, I felt something else, something like quiet outrage. She'd seen cases like this before. I could tell. Still, I wasn't ready to sit back and let her handle everything. That's not who I am. I wanted to understand how far my son had gone. So that afternoon, with permission from the facility, I called Malik. He picked up on the second ring, sounding cheerful. "Hey, Dad! How's the new place treating you?" "It's fine," I said flatly. "Got a letter from the county today. Said something about a property transfer. You know anything about that?" There was a pause, just long enough for guilt to make itself known. "Oh, that," he said, laughing lightly. "Yeah, it's just paperwork. You don't need to worry about that. I'm consolidating things so they're easier to manage. Tax stuff." "Tax stuff," I repeated. "And this power of attorney you've been using, where'd you get that signed?" "From you," he said. His tone sharpened. "Remember? The day we went to the bank last month?" "I haven't set foot in a bank since Christmas," I said. The silence on the other end stretched thin. Then he sighed. "Dad, I really wish you wouldn't make this difficult. I'm trying to help. You're not as sharp as you used to be, and these things can get messy. Sharp enough to know when my own son's lying," I said. He didn't respond. The line stayed open, but neither of us spoke. Finally I said, "You listen to me, Malik. You might have taken my keys, but you don't own me. You don't own my house. You don't own my name. You keep pushing this, and you'll see how quick an old man can fight when he's cornered." Then I hung up. For the first time since this started, I let the anger come all the way through. It wasn't wild or violent. It was steady, like heat from a wire carrying too much current. It burned quietly, controlled, focused. That night, I asked Nurse Alana for a copy of my medical report, the one that proved I was mentally competent. She handed it over with a small smile. "You're officially cleared. Mind sharp as ever." "Good," I said. "Because I'm getting out of here." "You got a plan?" she asked. I nodded. "More than one." 2 days later, Evelyn arranged my discharge. It wasn't dramatic, no argument, no shouting. Just paperwork, a signature, and a long walk out into the open air. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the sound of traffic, the smell of wet pavement, the way the world moves when you're free to move with it. She drove me back to my house, though I barely recognized it. There was a realtor's lockbox on the doorknob and a "for sale" sign in the yard. The grass had been cut, the porch swept, like the place was being staged for someone else's life. Evelyn looked at me. "You ready?" "Yeah," I said. "Open it." She used a spare key she'd gotten from the county freeze order and unlocked the door. Inside, everything was neat, but wrong. My wife's photos had been taken off the walls, replaced by generic framed art. The curtains were new, the kind you see in catalogs. Even the kitchen smelled different, like lemon cleaner instead of coffee and wood polish. It felt like walking into a stranger's home wearing my own shoes. I opened the refrigerator, empty except for bottled water and a single carton of milk. My tools were gone from the counter. The old clock on the wall, the one Dolores had wound every Sunday, was missing. Evelyn took out her phone, snapping pictures for the record. "He's cleared the place out. Probably stored things somewhere for staging. This will help your case." But it wasn't about the case. It was about what it meant. Malik hadn't just tried to sell my property, he'd erased my life inside it. I sat at the kitchen table and stared at the empty space where my coffee mug used to sit. "He was raised better than this," I said quietly. "His mother, she'd be ashamed." Evelyn said nothing. She let the silence stand. Sometimes silence is the only respect you can give grief. After that, we went straight to her office downtown. She drafted an emergency petition to the court for fraudulent guardianship and property misrepresentation. The supporting documents included my medical clearance, photos of the forged signature, and proof that the realtor's listing had gone live without legal consent. When we were done, she said, "You'll need to appear in court, Mr. Whitfield. That's the best way to end this clean." "I'll be there," I said. That night, I didn't go back to the facility. I stayed in a guest room at Pastor Leon's house. His wife made stew, and the smell alone brought back the feeling of normal life. Over dinner, Leon said, "Charles, I've known Malik since he was a boy. Ambitious, proud. But sometimes pride grows into something ugly when it's left unchecked. He thinks he's saving me from myself," I said. "But what he's really doing is burying me alive." Leon nodded. "Then it's time to remind him who raised him." The court hearing was set for the following Monday. When I walked into that small county courtroom, Malik was already there, wearing the same dark suit he'd worn to his mother's funeral. He looked confident, polished, every inch the successful professional. His lawyer, a younger man with too much gel in his hair, stood beside him flipping through documents. When he saw me, Malik smiled faintly, but it wasn't warmth, it was calculation. "Dad," he said, walking over, "you really didn't have to go this far. We could have handled this privately. I offered to talk before," I said. "You made it legal first." He sighed and shook his head like I was a stubborn child. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You're being manipulated by that attorney of yours. These people make money off confusion. Then I guess today's a good day to clear that up." We sat on opposite sides of the room. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, read through the paperwork quietly before speaking. "Mr. Whitfield," she said, looking at me, "your son has filed for guardianship under claims of diminished capacity. Do you wish to contest this?" "Yes, ma'am," I said, standing slowly. "I do. Do you have evidence of your capacity?" I handed her the medical report, signed and stamped by the physician. "Competency confirmed in writing," She read it, nodded, and passed it to the clerk. Then she turned to Malik's attorney. Do you have any medical evidence to the contrary? The man shuffled through his folder but came up empty. Your Honor, we have documented incidents suggesting forgetfulness and unsafe conditions at the home. The judge looked at Malik. Did you witness these incidents yourself? He hesitated. Well, not directly, but… Then who did? He glanced at me, then down at his papers. The home inspection team. They submitted a report. Evelyn stood. Your Honor, that report was conducted by a company owned by Mr. Whitfield's son-in-law's business partner. Conflict of interest. Also, the report has no photos or timestamps. The judge frowned. That's concerning. Mr. Whitfield, why did you decide to remove your father's personal belongings from the home? Malik's voice cracked slightly. I was trying to make it safe for showing. The house needed work. I didn't want him to fall or… Did your father ask you to list his home for sale? He swallowed. No, but… Then you had no legal right to do so. The courtroom stayed quiet except for the sound of papers being shuffled. The judge looked down at the forged power of attorney, then back at Malik. Did your father sign this? Yes, he said automatically, then realized what he'd admitted. I mean, he told me to handle things. Answer clearly, Mr. Whitfield. Did your father sign this document himself? Malik looked down, eyes darting. His lawyer whispered something, but it was too late. The damage was done. The judge turned to me. Mr. Whitfield, this court recognizes your competency and independence. The guardianship petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm instructing the county to investigate the alleged forgery and fraudulent property listing. She paused, then added, Mr. Whitfield, you may wish to consider revising your will and securing your estate moving forward. I nodded. Already in progress, Your Honor. When the gavel came down, the sound was quiet but heavy. Years of trust ended in that single tap. Malik wouldn't look at me. As people began to file out, I walked over and stood in front of him. You know, son, I said quietly, when your mother passed, I prayed you'd grow into a man she could be proud of. Instead, you turned me into paperwork. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to defend himself, but I didn't give him the chance. I turned and walked out. Outside the courthouse, Evelyn asked if I was all right. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. Feels like I buried my son today instead of defending myself. She nodded softly. Sometimes truth does that. That night, I went back to my house. Jenkins had been keeping an eye on it, and when I walked up the steps, he came over from his yard. Heard about court, he said. Good for you, Chuck. Glad it went your way. I thanked him, then unlocked the front door. Inside, the silence felt clean again. Not empty, clean. I sat at the table, pulled out a yellow pad, and started writing down everything I needed to do next: restore the utilities, call the bank, replace the locks, contact the insurance company. Step by step, just like wiring a panel. But halfway down the list I stopped. Because one task wasn't about logistics, it was personal. Rewrite the will. That night, with Evelyn's help, I started the process of undoing what Malik had tried to take. When a man's been humiliated by his own son, he learns two things fast: who he can trust, and who he'll never trust again. The morning after court, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the same surface where I used to help Malik with his homework. The table was scratched now, the polish dull, but it had survived everything: meals, arguments, birthdays, funerals. That table represented what I'd built, something solid, something that could hold weight. And now, that was me again. I wasn't a ward of anyone. I was a man, free and capable, and I intended to make sure nobody ever put me in that position again. Evelyn came by that afternoon with a small briefcase and a quiet smile. I've got your next steps ready, she said. You mentioned rewriting your will? I nodded. Yes. Malik won't be on it. Understood, she said, pulling out her papers. We'll create a living trust instead. That gives you control while you're alive and ensures everything goes exactly where you want after. She explained the structure, how the trust would hold my assets, how a successor trustee would manage things if I became unable, and how Malik's name could be legally excluded. Every word she said made sense. It wasn't just protection, it was order. When she asked who I wanted as trustee, I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the framed photo of Dolores on the counter. She had been my voice of reason, my moral compass. Without her, everything had started to drift. But I thought of someone else who had shown me the same kind of steady kindness. Alana, I said. Evelyn looked up. The nurse? She's been honest with me since day one, I said. Didn't talk down to me, didn't pretend I was sick. She listened. Treated me like a man, not a patient. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then she's the right choice. You'll need a backup trustee as well. Pastor Leon, I said. He's been my friend longer than my son's been alive. If anyone's gonna keep things clean, it's him. Good, she said. That combination will hold. It took about an hour to go through the documents, signing one after another. Every signature was deliberate. My hand didn't shake once. When we were done, Evelyn slid the folder back into her case. Congratulations, Mr. Whitfield, she said. Your estate is secure. Your home can't be sold or transferred without your explicit approval. Your accounts are locked with dual verification. Your son has no access, and the old power of attorney has been voided by court order. I leaned back in the chair and exhaled. Feels like breathing clean air again. She smiled. That's what freedom feels like. After she left, I stepped out to the porch and sat for a while. The air was cool, the sun low. Across the street, kids were riding bikes, shouting, laughing. Ordinary sounds, the kind you stop noticing until you lose them. For the first time in months, I didn't feel watched, managed, or analyzed. I was just home. That peace didn't mean I'd forgiven Malik. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out to people who haven't earned it. It's something they have to work toward. And he wasn't there. Not even close. Later that evening, Pastor Leon stopped by. He carried 2 coffees and that calm look of his. Heard the hearing went your way, he said, handing me a cup. It did, I said. But it didn't feel like a win. Felt like an autopsy. He nodded slowly. Sometimes truth cuts deeper than the lie. We sat quietly for a bit before he said, You gonna talk to him? Not yet, I said. He needs to sit with what he's done. And I need to live without his noise for a while. Leon sipped his coffee. That's fair. But don't let bitterness take root. It grows fast when you water it with pride. I'm not bitter, I said. I'm resolved. He chuckled. Spoken like an electrician. Fix the circuit, don't burn the house. Exactly. The next few weeks were spent restoring order. I changed the locks, called the bank to restore my access, updated insurance policies, and contacted every service Malik had tampered with. The list was long, but I worked through it methodically, the way I used to troubleshoot electrical panels, one breaker at a time, no shortcuts. Neighbors started stopping by again once word got around. People had questions, but they were polite. A few said they couldn't believe Malik had done what he did. I could. Ambition blinds good men faster than whiskey. One afternoon, I got a call from the realtor he'd hired. She apologized, said she hadn't realized the power of attorney was fake. She offered to withdraw her commission and send a formal statement for my file. I told her, Do that, and we'll call it even. By the end of the month, everything was back in my name. My home, my accounts, my peace. The system that had been built to push me out was now fully sealed against him. Evelyn called it bulletproof. But even with everything legally restored, part of me still ached. It wasn't the money, or even the house, it was the betrayal itself. The knowledge that the boy I raised, the one I'd sacrificed for, had looked at me not as a father, but as an asset. That was the part no lawyer could fix. I kept thinking about the last real conversation we had before this whole mess started, 2 years back, on my birthday. He'd bought me a watch, nice one, expensive. When I thanked him, he said, "You deserve nice things while you can still appreciate them." At the time, it sounded thoughtful. Now, it sounded like a hint. Like he'd already decided my appreciation window had an expiration date. I don't think I'll ever forget that feeling, being managed by someone who used to look up to me. A few weeks later, Alana came by the house. I'd called her to thank her for what she did, for telling me I had a choice back at the facility. She showed up in her scrubs, still on shift, holding a small bag of cookies. "Bake these on my day off," she said. "Figured you might want something homemade after all that hospital food." I laughed. "You have no idea how right you are." We sat out on the porch, sipping sweet tea and talking about nothing too heavy, the weather, her patients, my stubborn tomato plants. At one point she said, "You know, I see a lot of families like yours. Kids think they're saving their parents, but really they're just trying to feel powerful. It's sad." "Yeah," I said quietly. "Sad's one word for it." She looked at me for a long moment. "You seem more at peace, though." "I am," I said. "Because I got my life back. I didn't think I'd have to fight for it at this age, but here we are." She nodded. "You fought the right way. Most folks your age get angry, lash out, make mistakes that cost them more. You kept your head." I smiled faintly. "Anger's like electricity. If you don't ground it, it'll burn you before it hits its target." She laughed softly. "That's a good line. You should write that down." After she left, I sat on the porch until it got dark. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, just as they always had. I thought about how many of those I'd wired myself years ago, circuits that still worked because they were built right the first time. That's how I wanted my life to end, built right, grounded, steady. A few days later, I went to church for the first time since everything happened. Word had spread. Folks came up, hugged me, told me they were proud I stood my ground. Pastor Leon gave a sermon about respect, how it's not inherited, it's maintained. When he looked my way from the pulpit, I could tell he'd tailored it for me. "Sometimes," he said, "honor doesn't mean letting others lead. Sometimes it means reminding them you can still walk." After service, Malik showed up. I didn't expect him there. He stood by the exit, eyes down, hands clasped like a man waiting for judgment. When he finally looked up, he said, "Dad, can we talk?" I studied his face. He looked older, tired, maybe even ashamed. But shame's not the same as change. "Talk," I said flatly. "I'm sorry," he said. "I thought I was doing what was best. I didn't mean to hurt you." "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought at all." He swallowed hard. I saw you slowing down, and I panicked. I didn't want you to end up like Mom did, alone, no one helping. I didn't need managing," I said. "I needed respect. You can't fix what isn't broken, Malik. You just break it worse." He nodded slowly. "I understand now. I really do." I didn't know if I believed him. But I said, "Good. Then we'll keep some distance until we both mean what we say." He looked like he wanted to protest, but he didn't. He just nodded again, turned, and walked out. Pastor Leon came over, laid a hand on my shoulder. "That was mercy," he said. "No," I said. "That was boundaries." That night, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter. Not to Malik, but to whoever might one day read my will. Maybe Alana, maybe Pastor Leon, maybe some lawyer years from now. It said this: "If this paper finds you after I'm gone, understand one thing. I didn't cut my son out of my life because of anger. I did it because respect is the one thing a man can't hand back once it's stolen. My home, my work, my dignity, I earned them. And I'll die owning them, same as I lived." I folded the letter and put it with the rest of the trust documents. Then I turned off the light and stood by the window, watching the neighborhood settle for the night. Somewhere down the street, a car alarm went off, then quieted. A dog barked twice, then stopped. The world was noisy again, but my house was finally still. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. The way I did after finishing a long day's work, tired, but proud of what was done right. Malik could live his life however he wanted. But he'd never again hold power over mine. The following month, everything that had been quiet and private finally became public. Not because I wanted to embarrass my son, but because truth has a way of finding daylight when it's been buried too long. It started with a phone call from Evelyn. "Charles," she said, "the county investigator completed their review. They're filing charges against Malik for attempted fraud and falsifying a legal document. There'll be a hearing. You'll need to testify." I sat there in silence for a long moment, phone in hand. Part of me wanted to say, no. Just let it go. But another part, the part that had spent nights staring at my empty kitchen, knew that some lessons only stick when they're written in ink the whole world can read. "I'll be there," I said finally. "He earned that much." The hearing wasn't a dramatic courtroom like on television. Just a small county room, a few benches, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Malik sat across the aisle in a gray suit this time, more subdued, less confident. He looked smaller than before, like someone who'd been living in apology too long. His lawyer wasn't the same one as before. This new one looked tired, like she already knew how this was going to end. Evelyn sat beside me, calm as always, papers neatly stacked in front of her. The judge, same woman from our first hearing, started the session by reading out the summary. Case number 27B49. State of Ohio vs. Malik Whitfield, charges of fraudulent use of a forged document and attempted unauthorized property transfer. Her voice echoed in that small room. For the first time, my son's name didn't sound like family. It sounded like something being weighed by law. When she asked me to take the stand, I stood slow but straight. My knees might be older, but my pride still worked fine. Evelyn walked me through the timeline, the day he took me to Willow Pines, the signature I never gave, the notice from the county, the appraisal, and the fake power of attorney. Every question was simple, direct, and factual. Then she asked, "Mr. Whitfield, when you saw your signature on that document, what did you feel?" I looked at the judge, not my son. "Betrayed," I said. "Not just as a father, but as a man. I worked 40 years to build a home and a name that meant something. And the person I trusted most decided to use both to take what wasn't his. He said it was for my safety. But safety without consent is just a cage." You could have heard a pin drop after that. When it was his turn to speak, Malik stood up and tried to hold himself together. "Your Honor," he began, "I wasn't trying to steal from my father. I was trying to protect him. I thought he was slipping, missing bills, falling behind on things. I wanted to help before it got worse." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And forging his signature was your idea of help?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His lawyer nudged him to sit down. The judge flipped through the file, then looked directly at him. "Mr. Whitfield, your intentions are irrelevant when your actions cross the law. This court acknowledges your father's full competence and autonomy. Your behavior was manipulative, deceptive, and in direct violation of fiduciary trust. However, given that no property was sold and your father has requested leniency, the court will issue a suspended sentence with mandatory restitution of legal fees and a written public apology." I hadn't asked for leniency yet, but she must have seen it in my expression. I wasn't there to ruin my son. I was there to stop him. When the judge dismissed the court, reporters waiting outside started snapping photos. I didn't stop for interviews, but they got their headline anyway. "Local man fights off fraudulent guardianship by his own son." The story spread faster than I expected. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months came by to shake my hand. Church members brought casseroles and words like justice and vindication. I didn't want any of that. Justice isn't a parade, it's a quiet walk home when you've been gone too long. That Sunday, Pastor Leon asked if I'd speak after service, just a few words about dignity and family. I hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. After the sermon, I stepped up to the front of the small church. The congregation went still. I looked around, familiar faces, people I'd known all my life. And near the back, Malik sat with his head low, hands clasped in his lap. "I've been asked to say something about what happened," I began. My voice was steady, not loud. "Most of you know the story already. My son tried to take control of my life without asking. And for a while, he succeeded. But I want you to understand something. This isn't just about money or property. It's about a line every child eventually crosses when they stop seeing their parents as people." You could feel the weight of the room. Nobody moved. "I'm not up here to embarrass him," I continued. "I'm up here to remind everyone, old or young, that love without respect is just control in disguise. If you think you know what's best for someone, ask them first. Don't make decisions in secret and call it care. Because one day, that same silence will turn on you." Then I looked straight at Malik. "I'm still your father. I'll always be. But being my son doesn't mean having my permission to run my life. You can visit, you can talk, you can care, but you do it with respect or not at all." He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. When I finished, the room stayed quiet for several seconds before the congregation started to clap, soft at first, then stronger. I didn't need applause. I just needed air. Afterward, Malik approached me outside the church. "Dad," he said, his voice small, "I know I can't undo it. But I'm sorry, really sorry. I've been in my head these last few weeks thinking about what I did. You didn't deserve that." I studied his face. He looked thinner, humbler. The arrogance had finally cracked. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "But apology isn't the same as repair. Time will tell which one you mean." He nodded. "I understand." "Good," I said. "Now go make something right in your own life. Stop trying to fix people who don't need fixing." He left quietly, and I watched him drive away, wondering if maybe, just maybe, he'd finally learned something. That afternoon, I sat with Pastor Leon on the porch again. The air was warm, cicadas humming in the distance. He said, "You handled that better than most men would have." "I didn't want to hurt him," I said. "I just wanted him to remember who raised him." Leon chuckled. "You gave him that and then some." "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "Sometimes silence teaches better than shouting ever could." We sat there for a while, not talking. The neighborhood kids were riding bikes again, laughter echoing down the block. It felt like life had finally started moving in the right direction. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under my front door. It was from Malik. No envelope, just folded paper. His handwriting was careful, deliberate, maybe for the first time in years. It said, "Dad, I don't expect you to forgive me anytime soon. I just want you to know I'm trying to become the kind of man Mom would have been proud of, and the kind of son you deserve. Malik." I read it twice, folded it back up, and placed it inside the same folder that held my will. Not as a gesture of reconciliation, but as proof that maybe growth was still possible. Later that day, Evelyn called again. "Your story's making rounds online," she said. "Senior advocacy groups are using it as a case study. They're calling it the Whitfield example." I laughed. "Never thought I'd be an example of anything at this age." "You're proof that standing up for yourself doesn't end when you turn 60, she said. "And you gave a lot of folks hope who thought they didn't have a voice." That part hit me harder than I expected. Because when this started, I hadn't planned to inspire anyone. I just wanted my keys back. But maybe that's how change happens, one quiet man refusing to be erased. That evening I walked through my house room by room. The porch light worked again, the photos were back on the wall, and Dolores's clock ticked steady on the mantel. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down, and listened to the stillness. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Justice had been done, not loudly, not with revenge, but with truth that couldn't be denied. And for a man like me, that was enough. The months after the hearing came slow, which was exactly what I needed. No more papers, no more lawyers, no more waiting for the next betrayal to land. Just the kind of slow days that remind you you're still here, still standing. I fixed the leaky kitchen faucet first. Then the back porch light. Then the old radio in the garage that hadn't worked right since 2009. Every small repair felt like claiming another piece of myself back. Work heals men like me better than any therapy ever could. I made a rule, each day, do one thing that proves I'm still capable. It didn't have to be big. Some mornings it was just making breakfast, frying eggs without rushing. Other days I'd sand down an old chair, mow the yard, or take a walk down Birchwood Avenue to talk with neighbors. Little things, but they built me back up from the inside. Alana still stopped by once a week, usually after her shift. We'd sit out front with lemonade, talk about the news, or laugh about something that happened at the facility. She'd say, "You know, Mr. Whitfield, people at Willow Pines still talk about you. You're kind of a legend." I'd laugh. "A legend for what? Escaping?" She grinned. "For reminding people that getting older doesn't mean giving up your power." That kind of talk made me think. Growing old isn't the part that scares most people. It's losing the right to make your own choices. The right to say, no. Once someone takes that from you, age isn't what makes you feel old, helplessness does. That was the part of me Malik never understood. He thought safety was love. But real love lets a man fall and trust he'll stand again. One afternoon, I got a call from him. I hadn't heard from him in months. His voice was careful, almost humble. "Dad," he said, "I wanted to tell you I've been seeing a counselor. Trying to figure myself out." I said nothing for a second, just listened to the sound of his voice, slower now, softer, less sure of itself. He continued, "I've been volunteering with a senior outreach program downtown. Helping folks with paperwork, setting up accounts the right way this time. Thought maybe I could do some good." I nodded to myself. "That's a start," I said. "I don't expect you to trust me yet," he said. "But I wanted you to know I'm trying." "Good," I said quietly. "Keep trying. Trust isn't a switch, son. It's a slow rebuild." We didn't talk long, but when the call ended, I didn't feel angry. Just settled. That was enough for now. A few weeks later, Pastor Leon asked me to come speak at a community forum about senior rights, how families could avoid what happened to me. I didn't want to go at first. I've never been a man who liked talking into microphones. But Leon said, "You've already been through the fire. Might as well light the path for somebody else." So I went. The room was filled with older folks, some alone, some with their children sitting beside them, all listening close. I told them my story the same way I lived it, calm, honest, no fancy speeches. I said, "Don't ever sign what you don't understand. Don't let love talk you into silence. And don't let anyone, no matter their last name, tell you you're done making your own choices." When it was over, people came up and thanked me. One man shook my hand and said, "You just saved me from letting my daughter take my car keys next week." I smiled, because I knew exactly what that meant. Later that night, Alana texted me a photo someone had taken of the event, me standing at the podium, hands steady, no anger in my face, just certainty. She wrote, "You look like peace finally found you." She wasn't wrong. In the months that followed, Malik started stopping by once in a while. He never stayed long, just dropped off groceries, asked if I needed anything, then headed out. There wasn't much to say yet, but there was no tension either. We were rebuilding, slow and cautious, like rewiring a fragile circuit. One evening, he brought his 2 kids, my grandkids, with him. The youngest one, Maya, ran straight into my arms like nothing had ever happened. Kids don't carry their parents' sins, they just love who they love. I made them grilled cheese sandwiches and watched them chase each other around the yard. For a moment, it felt like Dolores was there again, laughing in the kitchen, telling me to stop pretending I wasn't smiling. After they left, I sat outside until the streetlights came on. The world was quiet again, but it wasn't empty anymore. I realized peace doesn't mean forgetting what happened, it means not letting it own you. The scars of betrayal don't fade, but they stop hurting once you start living past them. That night, I looked through the folder of documents Evelyn had helped me prepare: the trust, the will, the medical power of attorney, all locked tight in my control. But right on top, I'd added something new, a handwritten page titled, "Letter to my son." It wasn't dramatic. Just a few paragraphs. "Malik, you tried to protect me by taking away my say. I hope you've learned that protection without consent is just fear wearing polite clothes. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means I'm giving you space to grow into the man I always hoped you'd be. You still have time to earn back your place, one honest day at a time." I folded it, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it next to my will. Then I turned off the light and sat for a while in the dark, listening to the soft ticking of Dolores's clock. I thought about how life comes full circle, how sometimes you start as the teacher, and as the student, and still find grace in the middle. For the first time in years, I felt no anger, no bitterness, just quiet pride. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and walked out standing tall. And now, I had something even stronger than justice: peace. You know, people ask me sometimes if I ever regret taking my own son to court. The answer's no, not once. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it because there comes a point in every man's life where silence starts to sound like surrender. And I wasn't raised to surrender. My father used to tell me, "Respect doesn't come from fear, it comes from boundaries." Took me nearly 70 years to realize he was right. When I stood up for myself, I wasn't just protecting my house or my bank account, I was protecting the last piece of dignity I had left to give. Malik and I were not perfect. We still move carefully around each other, like men carrying glass. But there's progress. He calls. He listens. And most important, he asks now, before he acts. That's something I never thought I'd see again. Sometimes, when he visits, we sit on the porch in the evening, and he helps me fix little things, tighten a railing, oil the hinges, sweep the steps. We don't talk much about what happened. We don't need to. The quiet between us says enough. It says, "I hurt you. I learned. I'm still here." If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final proof that you own your story, and nobody else can rewrite it for you. So if you're watching this and you've got someone trying to control your life, a son, a daughter, a spouse, whoever, hear me clearly, stand your ground, but do it with grace. You don't have to yell. You don't have to break things. Just let truth speak for you. Paper and patience can do what anger never will. Because dignity, once defended, becomes the one thing they can never take again. Would you have done what I did, taken your own child to court to protect your name? Tell me in the comments. And if this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, because next time, I've got another truth to share, about the kind of strength you only find when everyone's already counted you out.